Hello and welcome to Into the Light. I'm your host, Edina Mauvana. Today we have Whitney Merchant. Whitney is a trauma healer and coach combining nervous system regulation, IFS parts work, intuitive energy healing, and sensual movement to help women who feel sexually shut down, help them reclaim their feminine power. Thank you so much, Whitney, for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thanks, Edina. It's really great to finally be together.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I
Yeah,
know.
yes, happy 2026.
A way to kick off the new year. And I know you're just mentioning my tree in the back. I'm still in Christmas winter
Yep.
mode. But yeah, thank you so much. I am excited to talk to you a little bit more. I know we were connecting a few months ago because I was learning more about being trauma informed on my own spiritual healing journey. And I was really interested in learning more about women who are working on regulating our nervous system for feeling like we need to just recover from some of the maybe the just trauma wounds, masculine wounding, whatever the case might be. And I feel like so much of that is what women are focusing on right now with all of everything going on. Yeah, I really appreciate the work you do. And I wanted to, yeah, just ask you a little bit about some of your work and how it is you got into helping so much with focusing on nervous system regulation and doing this intuitive healing work.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I think you're right. There's a couple things that are really in like the zeitgeist right now that are popular in the culture. One is talking about our nervous systems and nervous system repair. I see that more and more. And then also this idea of feminine embodiment is also like catching fire, I would say, in some communities. I started on the intuitive side. I went traveling after college. I was sexually assaulted and it was a death and rebirth experience. And then I had this like spiritual awakening really out of it. And then from there, I wanted to pursue healing and spirituality. And so that's where I started with the intuitive energy healing. And I did that for a long time. And I got a lot of skills and I was able to clear out my energy, but there were still the big issues in my life weren't really moving. And so then I needed to go find other ways to heal myself. And that's where I've started with a lot of nervous system training. IFS parts work has been really helpful. And then,
What is IFS parts work?
yeah, IFS parts work, it's a form of psychotherapy. It stands for internal family systems.
Oh, the internal family systems. Yeah. And people talk about like family constellations and that kind of thing. Is that related as well?
It's not. That is
Okay.
different. Although I've always wanted to do family constellation and I've heard people have transformative things. So IFS, the idea is that there's like a family inside of you, that we are not one mind, that we have all different parts of ourselves. And a simple way to think of that is if you are, I don't know, supposed to go out to a party on Friday night and there's a part of you that wants to go and there's a part of you that wants to stay home. Right? Like we've had those before. Or there's a part of me that really wants to go traveling, and there's a part of me that wants to go on a shopping spree, or can relate to having parts of different thoughts that don't align with one another. So you can understand that as different parts of yourself. And a lot of our parts have ages that are not our biological age. So
Mm.
if you have particularly like children, and we talk, people are probably familiar with the
Like your inner child.
people are
Yeah.
familiar with an inner child. But yeah,
Mhm.
there may be a part that was wounded very early. And then let's say this part carries the burden of feeling I'm not worthy. And a lot of times that part is stuck in the age where the wound happened. And they still feel like they're 5 or 10 or whatever. And so so a lot of internal family systems is starting to have this internal dialogue with your different parts. And there's parts that play different roles. I won't elaborate too much on that, but you start to have this internal dialogue with your parts. And I will say that when I've gotten in touch with parts, when I say they're an age, like one of the things you can do when you've touched a child part that you haven't maybe been in touch with before, you can ask, sometimes you can say to the child, do you know how old I am? And then you might say, I'm a 42-year-old
Yeah,
woman.
you're putting them in check, literally, right?
Yeah, and you're just, and then sometimes they're like, "What?" You're like, "Yeah, we're like middle-aged now." And one of the things that I do with my kid, with the like wounded kid, especially like abused children, is to say,
Mm.
not only are we old, but we have power, we can live where we want. We can drive. We have bigger legs. We can run away from people. We can drive away from people. We have a lot more power and
Yeah,
choice.
like you said, reclaiming your power in that
Yeah.
way.
And sometimes that is very comforting to the child within you.
Yeah, it's like taking back your power or empowering them to have that perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the real healing in IFS is actually spiritual healing because part of the philosophy of IFS is that in addition to your parts, you have what IFS calls self. But for those of us in the spiritual world, we might consider your spirit. So this is
Mm.
the part of you that is like undamaged, it's eternal, it cannot be wounded, it can't be damaged. It's your kind of God self. And when you tap into this part of you, that part has so much like love. I can start to feel the emotion. It loves your part so much. And it is like the remothering, the reparenting, the everything that your parts need. And most of the time, it's the self to part connection that actually relieves the burdens of the parts.
Yeah, self to part connection. You hear a lot about people doing my higher self and my lower self, and they're, oh, this is my higher self or my lower needs,
Yeah,
or even like your ego or your lower
right.
ego. So is it like that in terms of how people frame and understand these types of patterns of like where these thoughts are coming from?
Yeah, I think those are all very kind of similar models. I'll say that one of the things, a tweak with IFS that I really love is the idea that there are no bad parts, or let's say like lower parts. There are no bad parts. Every part, every belief comes from a place of probably trying to protect yourself or trying to survive. And so there's no,
It's like your fight or flight survival instincts, or is where
right.
those ones live there.
Right. So there's no shaming
Yeah.
or blaming parts. And that is inclusive. So it's been, I think it's very transformative for a lot of people with addictions because
Mm.
you reframe like the part that's addicted to alcohol or gambling. These are parts that are often very destructive for the person's life. And they probably have a part of them who hates the destructive part, who wants to be successful, and they feel like this part of them that drinks is like ruining their life. And but
Oh,
if
wow.
you when you get to talk to the drinking part, it's trying to probably soothe a pain that really hasn't been felt or seen or addressed, and it's trying to help in its own very self-destructive way, but it has a benevolent, even if
Mm.
the behavior is destructive. And I think when we start to talk to these parts of ourselves with the compassion and trying to understand that they may not have done a very elegant job, but like they were trying to
Yeah, it's like our
help.
defense mechanism reaction, response,
Yeah.
your trauma response. And I like what you were saying about the role it plays with like addiction recovery, or it sounds like things that I know people who are in recovery programs, they'll do the 12-step program and things. So there's ways to, I guess, in a similar way, tackle reconciling those where those traumas come from. Is that right?
I think so. I don't know that much about 12 step.
Yeah.
I think 12 step does have a lot of steps that are like making peace with other people. I think they're probably complementary. But I
Yeah.
love that one of the sort of foundations of IFS, and this is where it would differ from 12 step a little bit, is 12 step is trying to stop you from scratching, and IFS is trying to stop you from itching.
Oh, nice. So it's more deeply rooted in that way.
Yeah.
And you combine that with the energy healing and the intuitive abilities. And how do you specifically help women? Because I know a lot of it was being from sexual trauma. And I want to ask you about that because being especially shut down. Tell me a little bit about how, yeah, that works with the work you do and specifically that area.
Yeah, it started with I felt like I needed to reclaim a little more. I was married, I got divorced, and I didn't feel sexually shut down, but I still wanted, I don't know, I wanted more. I wanted something more. I wanted to feel sexier. I wanted to feel more confident, especially I think I wanted to feel more confident with men. So I started this pole dancing practice called S Factor, which is really like a feminine embodiment practice. And that is where I really started to tap into my like incredible erotic power and feeling just so powerful, feeling like I would leave class and I would walk down the street and I would feel like gorgeous and sexy. And because of my trauma, a lot of times, if I felt like I was getting sexual attention back, I would shut down because
Mm.
that felt dangerous to me. And this was the first thing I ever did where I felt like, sure, look at me, no problem. And that was very liberating to not feel that tension. And then I started exploring feminine embodiment with John Wineland, which is like in where you're working with men. And I felt like that is this, like, I want all women to experience this who are interested, especially trauma survivors, to really feel how good it feels to live more from your feminine energy and like to embody your feminine energy and just how wonderful it feels. But I did feel like I had to have done a lot of healing on myself to have been willing to do these workshops. And I feel like people who were earlier in their trauma journey, this would have been way too much, too intense, informed, a little pushy. And so that's really where like the crux of my work is to make a lot of these practices and principles available in a sort of slower, softer, safer way for people with trauma who need who need
So what are the practices and the principles that you really reinforce and in that?
in polarity practice.
Oh.
If in John Wineland's is like sitting across from a man, for instance, and if you're single, if you go, which I was, you're sitting across from a strange man, and the first thing you do is like eye gazing for 10 minutes, breathing,
Mm-hmm.
staring, you're looking like left eye to left eye. But I can tell you that a lot of my trauma clients, that's too much. They're not ready to sit down across from a stranger and stare into their eyes for 20 minutes. That intensity, that connection, because for most of the time for trauma, it's the interpersonal connection that was damaged and that no doesn't feel safe. And so like deep connection with a stranger is too much too soon. And that's the starting point of John Wineland. I want to work with people's nervous system to be able to just even show up in that way and take that kind of a risk.
And does that require working one-on-one with instead of in how does it look like when you're working with women who are
Yeah,
at that stage?
that's
Yeah.
a great question. I do. You can be both. There are certainly a lot of my nervous system training comes from like the polyvagal theory and vagus nerve healing.
Oh, yeah.
That can certainly be done in groups. My personal opinion, based on my experience as someone with a lot of trauma, who's worked with a lot of people as a client, and then also as someone who's worked with people, that I do think one-on-one is the way for people with trauma because they really need what's called co-regulation. So they
Yeah.
need to stretch their nervous system in relationship with one other person. And that's your coach, or I'm a coach, or you're a therapist. And that's where the real beauty happens because the damage was done in relationship and the healing is also going to happen in relationship.
Yeah. But I feel like sometimes, like you said, when we're single or whatever, and you need to do that work individual, like maybe on your own, right? It's a lot of that healing work. That's why they say it has to be done a lot of times in isolation, or people start off in separating that way and then needing support before being able to even enter into a healthy relationship with a romantic partner.
Yeah, I would say to a degree that's true. Although I would just say that it's very common for people with a trauma history to feel like they need to do it themselves. But so much of what trauma is feeling alone is like having something have happened and not be able to go to someone else and talk about it or repair it. And when you can do some work alone, I sit in front of my altar and I do healing work with myself. But you are going to hit a limit to where you can't really go any further. You need to face somebody else and have that, whatever you're feeling, that pain, that vulnerability, that grief, have it be witnessed by somebody else because that is what changes the nervous system patterning. That's that core belief, which is probably that I'm not worthy, I'm not okay as I am, I'm not like other people, like a lot of those beliefs. So when somebody else holds that for you and witnesses your pain, your grief, your anger, whatever it is, that's when your nervous system starts to be like, oh, okay, it is okay to feel I will still be accepted even though I'm carrying a lot of grief or I have a lot of pain or I have a lot of fear. And that's when really the trauma starts to unwind, I would say.
Yeah, and I really like how you're helping reframe, how it's like a really a part of that embodiment or empowering of the feminine energy to come through in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because I think what we're dealing with is so much of that having been repressed by guilt and shame and whatever trauma experiences. And yeah, so tell me a little bit about how that really works with our sexual energy and how I really like how you said earlier it's not just only about feeling sexy or whatever, but it's more about really living and embodying in your feminine and cultivating it like your life force energy, right?
Yeah, because it is life force energy, right? Like erotic energy is life force energy. If you think about it,
Yeah.
sexual energy is the energy that compels us to create life. It's what gives birth to all of us. It is life force energy, and it doesn't even have anything to do with having sex or being in a relationship. It really is the relationship to yourself and relationship to life. And I think if you think about we talk about being turned on, right? So even the words we use imply this like high energy state. And so when we're turned on, we have a lot of energy in our system. And so it's living your life from a higher energy state. Like to be turned on by, it's not just being turned on by sex, like it's reframing, like I'm turned on by this proposal I have to submit, or like I'm turned on by like the taste of my chai in the morning. Oh, it tastes so good. And letting yourself get that's the gift of the feminine. That's what the feminine brings to the world. Men tend to respond to it. It's not as much, I mean, we all have feminine and masculine energy, I should say. Men can cultivate their feminine energy as well, but it is the feminine energy that we bring, which is it's to be more playful and alive and that just feels good to live from that place. It feels amazing to live from that place. So
Yeah, and so many of women are struggling to be in the masculine centered world
exactly.
and especially when you're talking about working a normal job, doing everything that we have all the labor that we have to take on.
Yep.
And so what do you say to women who are struggling to reconcile that with wanting to lean more into this type of work so that they can break free from some of that?
Yeah, and that is something that I've worked in tech, I've worked in corporate jobs, and I came from a family where like my mom was the boss of the family.
Oh yeah,
So
like the
I come
masculine dominant, I know that.
Yeah, I come from, and so was my grandmother. I didn't have models of a very like soft feminine. Like the women in my family had a lot of masculine energy in there. They had feminine energy as well, but there was a lot of kind of let's get stuff done and be really smart. The way that I think of it is there is like when you're in your masculine all the time. I think of it as like walking around all day in shoes that don't quite fit. If you've ever
Mhm.
been in a pair of shoes that don't fit right, like there's some like low level pain that every step you take is a little more uncomfortable. And then you get tired because there's pain, and that pain drains your energy a little bit. Like you may not be conscious of it, but so you can function throughout the day, but you're getting a little bit worn down by this thing that doesn't quite fit. And so when you can cultivate your feminine energy, a lot of times, like I said, you can get into this turn on state and your energy comes flooding back.
It's like a flow state like that's when people start to talk about when you want to be manifesting and you want to be able to activate those sort of those type of powerful state. I love
Yeah, I
that.
think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I also think that one of the things that I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to polarity or feminine embodiment is I don't think women should be like less masculine and more feminine. I would think
Mhm.
of it as a lot of women have really have a very well developed masculine. Their masculine power is well developed. It's being used all the time. They're running it a lot. You don't have to necessarily turn it down. It's more like bringing it into balance. So you probably have an underdeveloped feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so when those are a mismatch, when those are out of balance, it is beneficial to put more time and energy into developing the feminine to get your feminine to the same level of mastery as your masculine is.
Yeah, I'm feeling like a lot of the yin yang energy
Yeah,
happening
exactly.
and how that's happening just on a like on a large scale. It's like our goal, our whole global, I don't know, everyone's in a spiritual awakening, doing a lot of that work, I would say. And yeah, so I really want to talk about how do you think this is combining a lot of the different spiritual traditions? I know you said you've been doing the work a long time, over 25 years, and bringing traditions from every different walk
Yeah.
of life. It seems like it's doing this work. So how do you combine a lot of those traditions in a spiritual way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ooh, I have to think about that. For one, I think that a lot of times when women open up to their feminine a little bit more, and I just want to just the last thing on that is you don't have to have a trauma history to have suppressed your feminine because as you said, it's a worldwide phenomenon. And most women just there's so much judgment about female sexuality. I don't think any woman makes it to adulthood without having some really negative
Yeah,
beliefs
and
being
did you
absorbed.
did
Yeah.
you also come from a religious background yourself? Because like
No,
I'm okay, yeah, because I feel like
that
a
was
lot of it is with different religious trauma too that women go
that's a
through.
big one. And I
Yeah.
didn't have religious trauma, but boy, were my parents, my dog's coming to say hi. My parents were like kind of boomers. They were not very sexually open. So family history, it was also like, don't be a slut, or I don't know, that's being sexy is shameful. And
Shaming, yeah, slut shaming.
yeah, and no one will take you seriously.
Right.
So I think when women like call back their feminine energy, it's not just erotic energy or sexual energy. I think what a lot of times what comes back is also your intuition. I think that's
Mm.
intuition is a feminine power because it's like a right-brained power. It's the opposite of logic and breaking things down is intuition. And when I cultivate more feminine energy through my body, I have found that my intuition is heightened as well, just as
Mm.
a byproduct, in part because the embodiment practice of feminine embodiment is listening to your body. It's getting out of your mind, it's listening to your body. So we do a lot of movement, but it's letting your body move instead of being like, I'm going to move my arm. How does my body want to move? And you have to listen. And that takes practice. But the more, when you start to listen to your body, then you start to listen. And then you start to listen to like, you can start to hear other things. What's that person really saying that they're not saying? And that's
Yeah.
intuition. You start to awaken all of those.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what do you think are the main benefits of really activating those like intuitions being more? What do you see that women really benefit when we do that work? Because I know what you're talking about as far as they even talk about how we have different type of extrasensory perception and things like that open up. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's it's really helpful for people with trauma, which again is my passion is to work with people who feel a little more shut down or they feel that they're a little more, I don't want to say broken, I don't think they're broken, but people who feel that have had a harder go of it. I think there's a few things. One is like learning to trust yourself. And most of us, so whether you've had a big trauma or not, probably grew up in a family where your authenticity was rejected in small ways or big ways, to fit in with the family, to fit in at school. And so trusting your own instincts, usually that got pushed out of us, where we were supposed to trust authority and not trust ourselves. So when you come back to your intuition, it's really like trusting yourself. And then I think that's key. I think the other thing that when I do energy healing, the first thing I do with women is to ground and then create this energetic bubble. And
Mm,
and the benefit of, there's a lot of benefits to that, but the big benefit is actually starting to feel a barrier of where you start and end and where somebody else starts
mm,
and ends. Because a lot of times our energy is just like leaking out all over the place. And
right.
especially people who are healers, a lot of healers, they're like sponges. They absorb energy. They don't recognize if it's theirs or somebody else's. Their energy's all over the place. That's part of the healing, is because they want to heal things. But starting to feel like this is me and this is not me is a game changer for a lot of people, in part because you literally get your energy back. You are leaking energy all the
Yeah.
time, and that is depleting.
Amazing. Yeah. So tell me about the stories then when you work with your clients, like what kind of transformations are we talking about here? And how long does it take to really start to feel like you are healed from a lot of that trauma?
Yeah, that's a great. I think everyone would say that healing is like a
Yeah.
lifetime journey, right? So
Right.
I think we can all agree. Oh, agree with that. My program is 4 months, which I think is, to me, it's almost like the bare minimum. But people can stay in the container longer if they want, but it's like a 4 month minimum because you
Yeah.
gotta really get in. And it's called the sacred shift because I, one of the things that is a turn off to me personally in the world of coaching is to promise people that their lives will change in 90 days and they'll be a different person in 90 days, which is not true. Maybe, and you might change, but in that, you've spent decades probably reinforcing a lot of your maybe less desirable habits. The idea that in 90 days you're going to undo that and have a new habit that never bothers you again seems
Yeah.
unlikely. But what you can do, what I want to help people with is, I call it the sacred shift because like you can shift the foundation of the belief system, all the deepest patterning that everything else is built on, right? Like the
Mm.
foundation of a house. If you shift it just ever so slightly, then the whole course of your life changes, right? Like everything, it's like a boat, like a giant boat. When you shift the navigation by a little bit, eventually, it'll go to a different country.
Yeah.
And so I think
I
that,
just like the imagery that it brings, like shifting into something. It's not so overwhelming to think you have to do like a major transformation and in a short period of time. So
yeah.
it feels like you just have to pivot just a tiny bit. And like you said, you end up in a whole new trajectory, right? Just with a certain like a reframing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that, yeah, because I know I have been hooked by some of that coaching stuff. And then I've been really disappointed that in 90 days, I'm not as different as I'd hoped to be. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people because it's great for marketing, but I'm not sure how accurate it is. But I am confident in the reason in what I can deliver in 4 months in terms of actually really changing. It might feel like a small shift, but it's a powerful and significant shift. And what that is varies by each person, which is why my program is also one-on-one, because it depends on where they're at. Like some of them, we're going to go back to the nervous system over and over again and be working more on that. And some of them really want to do more energy. They want to work on their intuition. They don't really want to do sexy dance.
Yeah,
Um,
and like you said, there's different modalities, like there's physical things you can do, and it's different for everyone. I find like whether someone wants to be journaling or doing different methods in this process. So
yeah.
it's tailored to that one-on-one need that
Yeah.
someone has.
Yeah, exactly. The foundation will be the nervous system because it is your nervous system that will stop you from progressing. And it's not, I know a lot of people like love affirmations and things like that. I have found that all of that stuff, it's like a sandcastle in the sand. Like it's just all going to collapse when your nervous system doesn't feel safe, letting you have more money or be sexier or whatever it is. So it tends to go back to that. Now, I have some clients that are their nervous systems are in pretty good shape and they really want to unlock more of their erotic and sensual energy. They love, like, a lot of the central movement is actually releasing emotions through erotic movement that can be transformative. But we start with where somebody is and talk about the goal. And then what we do week by week is really dependent.
Yeah, it's so important to I just love the work you're doing for women, especially who have, like you said, had experiences that were aware, created the trauma, and then just providing the best avenue to work out of it. I just really feel like there's so much growth that's happening right now as so many women are focused on that work. Where should women or anyone follow you who's listening? What's the best place to find you on social media? Where do you want, or in your course, The Shift? I want to hear about where to find that.
Yeah, I am on Instagram at Whitney Bird.
Yeah.
I am not a prolific social media user, but I'm trying, my goal is to do a little more this year, but that isn't where I tend to get my clients. And whitneymerchant.com is my
Yeah.
website that has my program. I also have, just because it's a big investment and I want to help people who maybe can't afford to pay anyone. Most websites have a freebie. My freebie is like 5 days of practices.
Nice.
So there's a couple energy healing, there's a pleasure practice, there's a nervous system reprogramming practice. Anyone can just start there and see if they like what I'm offering there. And then you have those practices as resources anyway.
Nice.
Say that's a great place to begin. And if you
Yeah,
live in
yeah.
the Bay Area, I do teach in person, pole dance and
The
some,
pole dance, yeah.
yeah,
That's
you
great.
can
I
see I
love
still
that.
have my, yep.
I love that, Whitney. Thank you so much. And especially with a lot of the movement that we need to be doing in our bodies, I just think it's great the way you combine different ways for women to be doing that work. Yeah. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom you like to share with any women who are maybe struggling to really step into this? I know we have a new year, new you, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, any final words of wisdom for women who might be, I don't know, just in that maybe still feeling like they're shame that they're not ready to do something like that yet.
Yeah, yeah, that's how most women feel. First of all, so I don't, you're not alone or you're not unusual. And a lot of people, they come in and they're like not really sure. And that's a great place to start. And the first time I went to the John Wineland workshop, which was, like I said, in front of a man, I was not really ready for it. And I just did it anyway. And it was tough. It was really awkward and it was uncomfortable at first. And then it got great. And most of the stuff that I have experienced was intimidating at first. And it felt awkward, and I wasn't really sure if it was me. And then you give it a little bit of time, and suddenly it's like the best thing you've ever done. So,
Yeah, overcoming the blocks and feeling all the pleasure. So I just love that. That's your mission, Whitney. And thank you so much for being here. I hope we can connect again soon. And I just love talking to you about all this stuff. I learned a lot about all the family systems and everything. So thank you so much.
likewise, Dina, it's great to be with you.
All right. Thank you.